Vejo um polegar positivo, estamos no ar. Começa agora o episódio 51 do Clube da Exame Invest, nessa esteira de celebrar a marca dos 50 episódios. Nós damos sequência ao episódio 51, chamando um convidado mais do que especial. Passamos quase grande parte aqui do ano de 2022 nos perguntando como o investidor estrangeiro está vendo o Brasil. Um fluxo expressivo de investidores internacionais de dólares entrando em 2022. Como que eles veem o Brasil, como que eles entenderam a eleição e como que eles estão vendo posição de Brasil, seja dentro da América Latina, ou seja dentro dos países emergentes, para o próximo ano. Pois bem, estamos com um investidor estrangeiro diretamente de Nova York que faz a gestão de 120 bilhões de dólares em mercados emergentes, 8 bilhões de dólares só em América Latina. Está aqui na mesa central do Clube da Exame Invest para discutirmos o cenário dos nossos investimentos. Para isso eu peço reforços. Bruno Lima, venha à mesa central, porque o episódio 51 promete. Que responsabilidade, BL.
Pô, espetáculo.
BL é novo,
BL, não, BL,
Bruno
LC,
Lima.
LC. Pô, prazer.
Ainda
satisfação.
emocionado na esteira do marco do episódio 50.
Cara, tô super feliz de poder treinar o meu inglês também.
Pois
Tô
é.
muito contente. Ainda bem que ele fala inglês, porque meu espanhol é muito ruim. Eu fiz pouco tempo de espanhol, aí não...
Mas você bota um básico ali no currículo, né?
Não,
você nem isso,
não, agora já foi. Mas, pô, prazer, satisfação inenarrável.
Que
tá
comece
aqui hoje.
o episódio 51. So switch to English, let me call you Luis Carillo. Welcome to Clube Exame Invest, to our 51st episode. Luis Carillo, Managing Director, Head of the Latin America team within the Emerging Markets and Asia Pacific Equities team. Welcome to Clube Exame Invest.
Muito obrigado por el convite.
Start with
So
Spanish.
we can go with Portuguese then.
Good.
Pretty nice little
No.
Portuguese you have.
No, let's try English.
Okay, let's see English. Okay, so thank you very much. As I was saying, for us, it's an honor. It's a great opportunity, very timing opportunity, because we spent the last maybe all of the 2022 episodes here. There's always this moment that we got, okay, but how are the foreign just trading in Brazil? How is the international investors taking in Brazil? Because we are seeing a massive inflow from US dollars, but bear in mind that it is a year that US Federal Reserve is hiking rates more aggressively than anyone could anticipate at the start of the year. China is locked down, is out of the markets. We have a war going on in Eastern Europe. And even though emerging markets are performing quite well, and even though we've seen a epic inflow in the Bovespa. So we would love to hear your view. The time has come to get the truth straight from the horse's mouth, as we say. You international investor, more than 25 years in J.P. Morgan asset, doing this portfolio managing in emerging markets in Brazil. What are your views here? But first, we'll get there. Our icebreaker. What do you do in your spare time to chill out from the market stress? Because I can imagine that managing money in the emerging markets in Latin America, it could get a little bit stressful sometimes.
Yes.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
from time to time.
So what do you do in your spare time?
I like to combine running with biking. So I go out and do 50 miles on a weekend and then come back and then run a little bit and relax.
And you're based in New York, right?
I'm based
And
in
you
New
live in the city?
No, I live in Connecticut.
Okay, so that's good.
good.
Because I was imagining to do biking and running in Manhattan.
It's not fun.
It's not that. It should not be that great, but that's okay. So running and biking,
Yes.
every day, every other day.
Weekends very
Once in a
heavy. And I run three times a week.
Oh, that's great.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's great.
Good. We registered then.
And how many times during your
Even in the
time
winter,
or
this is a curiosity.
What?
Yes.
Why not?
Why not?
The biking, you mean? No,
The biking and the running.
The running.
Oh, you're
the
doing
running
indoors.
I
We
can.
do
I
indoors in the winter.
It's the Peloton bike, which
Oh,
is
okay.
very
Okay.
famous.
Great. You have any other
No, because
questions?
I was going to ask how many times during your bicycle, when you were riding or
Yes.
running.
Fallen.
I mean, how many
But
times do you get an idea that
You usually do with music, listen podcasts, or
With one ear on music and the other on the cars next to me.
okay, yeah, safety first, right? So that's good. We just registered biking and running. A lot of managers actually here, and a lot of triathlon
surfing.
guys. Surfing. I mean, the top one here in Brazil. I don't know if it's gonna be a surprise for you. For us, it's kind of a surprise. The top one sports that comes here, tennis.
Tennis.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you know, this is the 51st episode. Guess how many times soccer came out here?
I'm going to guess low. 5?
Two.
2?
Two? Only
No,
two. Only two managers.
I was gonna.
decided soccer here. The top one is tennis by far. The number two, I would say, it's running, biking,
Golf.
Yeah,
golf too. It's not a regular.
triathlon
popular
guys.
sport. Yeah, a lot of triathlon
Those are
guys.
professional runners.
Yes.
Bike.
So moving on really quick so we can get to the investment discussions. And we are really looking forward in hearing your views, macro and micro here in Brazil. The following question is how you ended up in the financial markets. Like, really quick. You already
Yes.
have like 25 years just in J.P. Morgan.
Yes.
But how you ended up in the
I
financial markets?
used to be a consultant, and I liked more the financial part than fixing the companies. But I learned how to fix them and what was working and what was not. So that helped me a lot to select good companies. That's what I
That's
like.
interesting. That's and you started in JP always on the buy side, or
Always in the buy side, as an analyst, then as a PM.
Oh, great.
Great.
Oh. So you started as PM in 1998.
An analyst as in 1998, and as a
Okay.
PM in 2003, I believe, or in 2002.
Just
Nice.
almost yesterday.
Yes, almost yesterday.
Yeah.
You've
A
seen
few cycles in there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing. A lot of cycles you
Yes.
managed to go through.
Yes.
You've seen a lot of things. You've seen a lot of crises, political
Yeah.
ones.
No, because I was going to start with just something got
Go
in my
on.
mind, because yes, I can't. I'm not. No. The last episode we had Louis here.
Yeah.
And then he's just actually, he just told us something on almost truly interesting. He told us that every time that Fed raises rates, what happens to emerging markets?
collapse.
Okay, so in this cycle,
Yeah.
everything is different, right?
It's a very dangerous phrase.
Yes.
But yes.
So that's my teasing.
Yeah.
They're the four most dangerous words in the investment industries. This time is different.
Correct.
But
Is it?
what is happening this time then?
Well, this time around, the regional central banks did a very good job raising rates in advance.
Interesting.
And I think the inflation is beginning to come down before in the US, and they will be able to cut rates before the Fed will. The inflation may not go as low as we used to have it, but we will definitely not keep it at the rate we have it today. So hopefully, unless we have a collapse in the economy in the US because of a very nasty recession, which we will survive without dramatic flows out, as usual.
Okay, so to kick off our conversation, step by step we get here in Brazil and how you see Brazil relatively, how you see Brazil in terms of absolute terms. But first thing, there is always a curiosity that I have. I mean, I'm not from equities, but I'll take this opportunity to ask you here, and maybe this is a curiosity for a lot of listeners and a lot of our club members here. How do you manage a equities portfolio in terms of emerging markets, Latin America? Because this is one thing. We are here in Brazil. I mean, we are naturals. We know the companies. We see the companies. We consume the companies. We read the local newspaper. We visit the companies whenever we want to talk to the investor relations and stuff. But how do you do that? Like sitting in New York City, and you have to manage a portfolio with companies spreading around a lot of countries, volatile ones, undeveloped ones, and with very different in terms of religious, language, culture. How is the investment process?
Politics.
Yes, well, it's we need to take a long-term view. That's the first thing. And to take a long-term view, you need to avoid noise. And being too close to the market, you tend to confuse news with information. And they are very different things. And one will be tactical, the other will be strategic. So the first thing we do is try to understand the companies and define what kind of companies we want to have for the long run, because not every company can fit that profile. And then we worry about valuation. But the first and most important thing is understand the economics of a company, the duration that it has for competitive advantages, disadvantages, threats, and all those things. And then the governance to make sure that we can trust and in the management and in the controlling shareholders, and then they have the skill to deliver what they tell us they want to do. Those three things are the things that are the most important part of our investment process. Once we have the company in the right classification of the type of company we want, then we worry about what's the upside potential that we can get with them. And that's another story because we need to look at it in dollars.
Yep. So, but prior to the kind of company, the first step will be to discuss the macro, the cycle that we are in.
No, actually, the most important thing is actually defining if the company can produce returns, positive
regardless
returns,
the sector or the profile.
Yeah, well, there are some sectors have lower quality companies or are less prone to produce returns, consistent returns over a cycle than others. The more the company can control their pricing, their growth, the better. A commodities company can have very good years, like what we have seen with Vale and Petrobras in recent past, but they don't control the price of oil or iron ore. So they depend a lot on things that they cannot control. And we try to have lower positions in companies like that than in a company that's a consumer-related company that has pricing power, competitive advantages, and things like that.
So let me just try to provoke a little bit here. A great company on an average sector or a great sector and an average company in...
Yes, we like to have great companies in an average sector. And remember that in our mind, it's more important to have a very good company with structural advantages than a very good manager running a company in a very good way. Because at the end of the day, we need a company that can be run by a monkey, because eventually a monkey will run a company. So we better have a company that's sound enough to run easy, with good competitive advantages.
Right. So
You mentioned Petrobras and Vale here, just for instance, but let's start from that. And I mean, to start talking about commodities, Petrobras and Vale, we have to talk about China.
Yes.
So two things about China here. How you seeing this reopening? How you seeing this pent-up demand that China getting back to market and the effects on the emerging markets, especially the commodities producers? And number two, if you would like to touch on, okay, this financial flows approach in terms of how do you kind of decide? It's just a bottom up, you pick the company, or you usually have a mandate that you have to have something in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, East Asia, China. How this is a mandate, or you have to set up this strategy? But anyways.
That depends on the mandate, but most of our mandates are actually not filling a bucket. We need to create everything from the bottoms up. So we select companies, and the country or the sector is an output, not an input. So it starts the other way around. And your question on China is interesting because it has two answers. One is tactical and the other one is strategic, and both are problematic. On the tactical end, we have this reopening that will probably produce some demand because people is just tired of not being able to do anything. And that could be interesting because it's a lot of demand for goods, but on the other end, we may not have enough goods to supply, so it may be inflationary. So tactically is difficult to read because we don't really know. They can follow the same trends that we saw in Latin America and Brazil when they reopened, but they may not. We need to follow those trends to understand a little bit the tactical part. But then we need to think about China in the longer run. And the fact that how China has approached big companies is something that we need to understand as a risk, that China is offering opportunities, but the opportunities may not be as big as we think they are. Because in our mind, the more successful a company becomes, the more likely some of the output of that company in terms of earnings may not be yours, or there will be more interference from the government to them. So it's difficult to understand how to price a runway of an investment that you don't know how long it is. So the strategic view on China you need to be able to understand what portion or how big is the opportunity in reality for you as a foreigner investing in China. And that's very tricky, and I don't think we know the answer yet.
Yeah, because this we were discussing this in the previous episode. I mean, how investable is China? And I think you just mentioned that yes, it is investable, but don't get it wrong. Don't approach it as you're investing in the second largest economy in the world, because the investable space is not that large.
Yes, or the companies are not going to use to necessarily share that size of the opportunity with you, and you don't know, and it's difficult to understand how to price that.
Mm-hmm. The thing I asked it, Bruno, sorry, because there is this approach of filling the buckets, as you just mentioned as an example, that the emerging markets, and you manage the emerging markets as well, and China is the bulk of the emerging markets. So that's why this question, China is investable or not, it is important, because if you take China out of, there's a lot of excess flow to park somewhere, and this is a growing consensus here in Brazil, that everyone is following. Then I would like to explore this more home bias. I mean, you're from Mexico, so you feel it as well as we are Brazilian. We live here, so we went all through the noise every day. And it's you get sick of your home buy and say this doesn't work. I can't invest in Brazil, and barely one knows that if you just look to Argentina, Chile, Colombia, South Africa, things are complicated as well. But again, the thing is that so locals are I wouldn't say pessimistic, but they're skeptic, especially with the election process. There's a new government, so a lot of question marks around especially on the fiscal policy. But there are a lot of portfolio managers, locals here that say, okay, but you have to balance that, because locally everyone is skeptic, everyone is is doubting, and trying to seeing is believing, so not giving the benefit of the doubt. But globally, beware to be short Brazil, or beware to be under-investing in Brazil, because Brazil could happens to be the cleanest dirty shirt in the emerging markets. So all the flows end up being here. Yes. How do you see, and do you agree or not with this approach of this thinking?
Yes, I think one of the things that drove the flows to China was the growth and the size of the potential opportunity that everyone saw. And on the other end, not only Brazil, but the rest of LATAM was not really growing, and there was a lot of political risk that added volatility to the things. So you had lower risk than in developed markets, and obviously in China, and a lot more volatility. So why would you risk more money in a company that has more risk than the ones we can buy elsewhere? I think with the changes in China, with the policy there, and with Ukraine-Russia conflict, we began to realize that the political noise or the geopolitics in our region are actually less of a problem compared to what we see in the rest of the world. Actually, it looks like child's play now. No one is invading anyone, and the intervention we get on Petrobras, when we get it, is relatively small compared to what we see around. So, to be honest, I would have expected a lot more flows to Brazil and the region than we have seen so far, because the delta of growth, meaning Brazil and LATAM, is growing more in relative terms versus the developed markets with less problems. So we were growing very little, and the other guys were growing a lot, and that delta is shrinking, if not going the other way around. So the growth is kind of there in the short term. We just need to make sure it stays higher for longer, and the story is there. So tactically, we have some help from commodities reopening in China. We need to get our act together and make sure that the growth rate stays with us for longer.
Interesting.
But I mean, just to keep on the flow stuff here, but since we part of the financial community, it's like a new way to understand that. So is China investable or not? So if it's not, I'm gonna get all of my resources and I'm gonna put in invest in Brazil, Thailand, whatever. We were hoping that because of that, probably we would
Yes.
receive a lot more inflows than we just mentioned. But if this is gonna continue, this mindset that for part of the financial community, China is not investable, where do the flows are going to? If not Brazil, so I mean,
Yes.
or they are actually waiting that the Fed pivot and okay, let me go back to the US and whatever.
I think flows went back to the US and to rates and bonds for a while because
Okay.
that is much more attractive to. In Brazil is a very good example. If you can have a bond for 5 years that pays you 12% per year, and inflation is trending to 4, it's a very easy decision. No?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of competition from rates that made it difficult. And to be honest, I think the other technology or the tech sector in the U.S. became an investment, emerging market in its own. They were very high valuations, very risky, and volatility grew out there. But there are a lot other parts in the U.S. that is a very large market that pulled a lot of funds too. And don't get me wrong, China is investable. It's just difficult to value for how long and how much to put there. So I think what investors are doing is looking at China on its own, and then the rest of emerging markets as another bucket.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so I don't see the flow going directly to everything else because China is investable. It's just you need to be careful on how you value it. No?
So we are actually, it's the old story that fixed income against equity markets.
Especially in Brazil. No?
Okay.
You have a 10% real rate today. We haven't seen that in at least 5 years, at least. We
Yes.
used to have it.
Yes.
It's not the same Brazil as we used to see 10 or 15 years ago. So there are some political risks, clearly, that we need to understand, or uncertainties. But again, in relative terms, there are a lot more uncertainties in the rest of the world than in Brazil.
It's not that maybe locally we improve it, but the developed markets somewhat
Yes.
catch us down in the middle.
Yes.
Like some
Yes.
episodes recently happening like in the UK. UK is trading like in emerging markets. If you try to trade UK bonds
Yes.
recently and stuff. That's really interesting, Carillo. Thank you very much for sharing. The other questions that I would have is that as we hear a lot, is that for foreign investors, they are even more sensible to pricing and positioning, and that actually has been helping Brazil to perform or outperform, given this background that Bruno Lima just shared. Because valuations were still are. This is my question. So were very attractive at the start of the year, and nobody has it. I mean, if you follow, we followed a lot of fund flows, with this mandate of emerging markets, with this mandate in Latin America, and the exposure to Brazil was hitting rock bottom in the recent years. Nobody was exposed really in Brazil. How do you see this evolving? Do you think Brazil will get back to average? Will get even overweighted in this kind of portfolios? How do you assess this?
I think that actually the pragmatic question is, what do you, as a foreign investor, do you need to see in Brazil, for what's the next leg?
I think we need to see an economy that can grow not based on the demand from China, but based on the internal demand and consistently.
To be more alpha played in a beta.
Correct. And the tactical position will help Brazil for flows, but it's a tactical flow.
Interesting.
We need to make sure it's strategic, and people want to be here because there's value being created in Brazil, and we need economic growth for that.
Yep.
Valuation is actually very attractive.
Still is.
Very attractive. But remember that a lot of the market is commodities, and when commodity prices are high, valuations of commodities are low. And that's not necessarily the best way to get into commodities. No? But you're buying at the peak of the cycle. We have some issues with oil that may last for a lot longer than we think.
Yeah.
I don't think we can ask Exxon or the bigger oil companies to invest now. If we have
Overnight.
asked them 5 years, no, don't invest because you're bad. And it takes 7 years. I'm sure that in 3 years, we're going to tell them, no, don't invest. It's impossible to get flows of oil that fast. So,
Have you been increasing exposure to Brazil in this emerging markets in Latin America portfolio?
yes.
What has has been your favorite, sector, a company, your position here, how you're looking Brazil, and we start to get down to companies, stocks, moments, valuation.
Yes. We added to commodities because of the tactical situation, but we are liking a lot more interest rate sensitive stocks, utilities, banks, things like that. And it's not only Brazil, it's everything in Latam, especially Mexico rather than everything in Latam.
Well, nowadays, do you prefer Mexico over Brazil?
No, I think I prefer Brazil over Mexico still today. This is a deeper market. There's a lot more opportunities. And if you like utilities, for instance, there's more clearly in Brazil than there would be in Mexico. And banks, there's more in Mexico and Brazil than there are in Mexico. I think Brazil is still, and the weight of the commodity is still much larger in Brazil.
Yeah, Brazil.
Well, in terms of utilities, a lot of actually recently, it's interesting to host the show because, it's been 1 year and depending on the cycle, depending on the phase, depending on the moods that we see in the markets, we see, the most popular themes coming up. Yes. So there was the time that every show we have to ask about fintech or something. Yes. And then it moved to, I don't know, commodities, oil. But recently I've been noticing more utilities, people saying utilities and share their cases and the best pick, the top pick in utilities. Do you have companies that you really like in this utility space?
I think it's not only utilities, it's dividends, really.
Yeah.
If in an environment like what we have today, and to be honest, generally, dividend returns are usually underestimated, especially if you own them for a long periods of time. The compounding of a 4% yield every year, it makes a lot of money over a long period of time. And if you look at the yield of Bovespa today, it's probably around 12% just this year. Remember, Petrobras is paying or paid already like 40% in dividends this year. Vale is paying 15 or more. So the bigger weights and the utilities are paying between 8 and 12%. So the Bovespa is actually has a very nice yield today. And there's a Bovespa dividends, which even has a much higher yield. So owning dividend plays is actually not a bad idea. I mean, not everything is growth. Dividends are very important over long periods of time.
So you've been increasing your exposure to Brazil, but in a more defensive way. Like utilities, dividend payments, big banks.
I think it's important to mention that Carillo has a huge portfolio, so he has to be like the liquidity is
important.
It's really important. So banks, it's a huge sector. Commodities, a huge sector. So
and you cannot take important tactical views, because especially if you are investing in an emerging markets fund that is very large, you don't turn on a dime. You need to take longer term views because you're not going to be able to sell your stocks in a week sometimes. So you need to, have some tactical views in part of your funds, but the rest needs to be in things that you are comfortable owning them for as long as you can.
Nowadays, for example, what's the sector in Brazil, regarding Bovespa that you see the best, risk return opportunity, risk adjusted, correct?
Yeah, I would set up the question because Bruno, I was asked about this. I would just frame in another way because Bruno Lima asked a very savvy question that was, okay, what do you want to see to increase your exposure here in Brazil? You said growth. And it's not that easy because, growth is a consequence of a good economic agenda, not a cause, as some economists used to think. Let's spur growth, everything else comes along. Well, it's the other way around, actually. But okay, growth. And here's the question that Bruno Lima just made. What is the sector or what is the company that you're just looking, like holding your horses, and once you see growth really picking up in the horizon, you want to say, that's it, I want to get in there now?
That's a very interesting question, but I'm not sure if you're going to like the answer because it's probably Mercado Libre.
Okay.
Interesting. That was a very popular trade here in Brazil, and not just Mercado Libre, actually, the whole e-commerce space.
Yes, but this is, in my mind, these are the guys doing the right things for the long term, and the competition is just not there. I'm worried about the tactical part, which is too complicated. They need funding. These guys are very concentrated doing what they need to do for the long run.
But I think that's a really good answer actually, because
I like the answer.
It's great to it's great to as a reflection, because we were just talking out there, valuation for you does not matter too much in the beginning of your investment process, right?
Yes.
So I mean, nowadays, for example, when you see Mercado Libre, which is our actually one of our main topics there in the e-commerce universe, actually is it has a from multiple approach, etc. It has a valuation premium when you compare to the others, but execution is much better. So I mean, I think that if you could actually give us a little bit more from this point of view, valuation against execution risk, or how much valuation discount actually catches you in order to let me study a little bit
Flash
deeper.
is a yellow flag for you.
Yes, I think when we start looking at multiple of sales, we worry, because that's way too much. Multiple of sales, pretty much. But when we are looking at a company where we are comfortable with economics and the duration and the governance, we start actually, the problem is not the valuation, but how big is the position to begin with. So it's an allocation issue rather than a position sizing, rather than do I get in now or not? I'm in now, but I'm not probably going to have as much as I want to have until I'm more comfortable with the environment rather than with them.
Okay.
So that's how we look at it.
So, great.
Interesting.
So you started with some discipline regarding size, and then you
add as you get comfortable.
I would just go further with that. I mean, you mentioned Mercado Libre. Is there any second pick or sector that the more cyclical ones? Is there anyone that you're aiming, kind of holding your horses and start looking for?
In more cyclicals, it's taking away commodities, because that's way too cyclical and way too tactical. I think an industrial company like Wegi, for instance, is a winner not only in Brazil, but in the rest of the world. We have seen already Siemens, which is the gorilla in the room, actually leave Latin America and Brazil especially in their hands. They have shown that they can compete with big guys, and they're gaining market share every market, including the US. Companies like that are actually something that we like.
So how many companies you have nowadays, for example, in Brazilian companies that you have like your addressable market? I mean, your investment approach. I mean, you have 15 companies, 20 companies, because I mean, in the past I was talking to foreign PMs, and it's not a huge size.
No, it's around 30.
30 companies.
Yes.
So interesting, right?
35.
That's your X-ray.
Yes.
All right.
It's not that large, actually.
No.
So have like a screening?
No, we have a very large group of analysts that help us actually do that, and by sectors around the world. So they have the ability to have perspective comparing what they're seeing in China versus what they're seeing here, which helps a lot. And again, your question at the beginning, how do you manage it to be from abroad and far away from the market? Because we don't want them to confuse news with information.
Yes.
How many analysts, please?
Emerging markets has 39.
39.
Yeah. So we have resources.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And looking at Latin America, we have roughly 8 or 9.
So when you decide to invest in Mercado Libre, actually, you're probably, comparing or discussing Mercado Libre against, Alibaba.
Amazon, Alibaba.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. See, all of those, yes.
Great, amazing stuff. Because I was asking, actually, Alibaba was a purpose, because Alibaba just, derated a lot recently. Probably part of, the China integration, etc. Part of, China risk, etc. Yes. So I mean, when you, I prefer execution, right? There's a premium, but I mean, I prefer these guys here, much more growth on this. I can touch the growth, almost something like that.
Yeah.
Perfect, awesome.
Just getting the chance to ask for international PM. how do you approach SOEs, the state-owned enterprises in this universe of emerging markets? Because this is, it's risky because from this constraints of covering, a lot of countries way out of your kind of range, sitting in New York. So what was your experience through all your career in having or not having? Because we already have, portfolio managers here. That's a principle for me. I don't want any kind of SOEs. Never. Regardless of the cycle, regardless of the government, I just don't want it. Especially in the year of election here in Brazil, there are a lot of managers here, and there on the other hand, there were a lot of managers here that say it's all about price.
Yes.
Yeah, I do the math. It's all about price. I don't get it. And price is price. There's a lot of things already embedded in the price, and I'll have it. Yes. So, how is your take? Not just in Brazil, but in all these Latin America, all these emerging markets, in your experience on. It was a net positive or a net negative of holding SOEs in your portfolio?
It depends on the eyes of the fund manager and the mandate. The smaller the mandate, the more you need to look at them even if you don't like them. The further away you are from the market, the less important they are.
Exactly.
So if you are an emerging market manager, you can have the view of, I don't want to touch them because there's too much risk. I don't understand it. I'm not going to be able to predict it. I don't want them. If you are a Brazil manager, you need to, at least for risk control, you need to approach them very carefully because there are risks that you are not going to be able to predict. But it's more a risk control issue than an investment position for us because, as you said before, they look at it as a pricing issue. Yes, but if your primary concern is price, you're more tactical than strategic. So shorter term, longer term horizons worry less about that. So that's why it's different.
Interesting.
Great answer.
And now I'll take the opportunity to add another curiosity that we hear a lot and read a lot. That this is becoming very popular recently for a lot of reasons, but ESG. So so we hear a lot that ESG is being dominant to drive the flows or to drive the views or to drive the narratives, and there is this perception, or at least among locals, there is this talking that so maybe now Brazil in the next cycle could be more appealing in terms of ESG because of more market friendly manage of the forests or being more well perceived from abroad. So a lot of sovereigns, a lot of is taking this into consideration. So this adds up to the bigger inflows outlook that we could have here in Brazil. So this is the opportunity to how this ESG, recently have been shaping the flows or shaping the approach of setting up this portfolio.
Yes.
Actually, and sorry, and even your investment approach, how did you incorporate ESG?
It's being really a factor.
Yeah, it's interesting, but we have always considered it.
Yes.
We never called it ESG.
Interesting. Yes.
Because remember, I mentioned we look at economics.
Yes.
Governance and duration, which in duration you need to have a company that's sustainable. And if you are hitting your social, the employees on one end, or you have a lot of lawsuits or the environment in one kind or another, you are not as sustainable as you think as a long-term investment. So for a more perspective, it was part of our investment process forever. We just didn't call it ESG. It was part of that analysis. Exactly. Now we call it ESG, and we even have 40 questions that we need to answer on every company that the analysts cover that are related to that. And they are targeted to the specific sector. And the answer of a question could be a no or a yes, and both need to be explained. But it's not a box-ticking exercise. Not every yes is a not investable company, right? So you need to understand why is it a yes or a no, and then you define if you want to buy it or not. But it's always part of our analysis because
it always have been
longer term, always have been.
Oh, interesting.
Great.
Thank you for sharing. So we have some questions here that we like to ask every portfolio manager that sits here, and one is I don't know let us try with you. But in Portuguese, I don't know if it's the same in Spanish. We call it momento deu ruim, which is, I don't know, in English, I would say it's an epic fail that you had somewhere. Maybe you had it once, I don't know. But an epic fail that you had in your investment career,
Or
in your portfolio.
investment
I mean, the ones that just comes to mind that you dedicated a lot for that case. You get on a plan. You visit the country. You visit the management. You did all the cross check in the sector, and you went big, and it was an epic fail. Yeah. Does any episode comes to mind and the lesson learned in this process?
I think anyone that tells you that they don't have epic fails is lying. But the one that comes to mind is Nextel International.
Nextel. The one
Exactly. And I actually thought it was going to be bigger than it was, and I made two important mistakes. One is that I didn't pay enough attention to how reliant they had to be in one technology and one producer of phones, and how the technological change was going to move the rest of the universe, and the fast growing of the system, especially in Brazil, had a lot to do with social media almost.
Yes.
Because it started with an artist, Globo, or one of them were actually communicating with it, and people saw famous people using it, and boom, it was a social, just like influencers are doing it today. It
went viral.
It went viral, and everyone wanted to have a BB Nextel and communicate directly.
I had mine back in the days. Did you, Bruno Lima?
Actually, not.
Yeah. But then they started growing too much, and the phones began to be more expensive. The competition got their act together, and it was a lot easier to have data and text messaging.
Yes.
And they couldn't generate enough
up.
cash, and I was too slow to sell. I thought it was a cycle, and it wasn't. So I lost a lot of money in that one.
Sorry, and that's I mean, because of that, just to understand a little bit.
It went to zero, by the way.
Zero.
It's not.
Sure. Yeah.
Where do you used to trade? Where?
It used to started, I don't remember, like 5. It went all the way to 20 something, and then I sold it at 9, and it went all the way to 0. But I lost a lot of money.
Jesus. What a ride.
Yeah.
What did you change in your investment process because of
avoid companies that rely on one single supplier and one single technology, and be more sensitive to social change.
Social changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they can actually be a flaw that is impossible to change.
Do you see any of these two signs around nowadays anywhere?
I think there are a lot of issues with wallets today.
Okay.
That everyone wants to have one, and not everyone can have money in a wallet in a different basket. So we need to be careful with things like that. There are a few that will survive, but it's going to be in one. You will count them in one hand, not in two. No? So there are a lot of social trends that everyone wants to have a wallet now. Well, digital wallet.
Digital wallet. Perfect.
And it was listed on?
It was listed on New York Stock Exchange.
Okay. Ticker Bruno Lima. Next, I'm kidding. Because every stock that people bring here tests if he knows the ticker by his heart.
I don't want to remember that.
Yeah. So ticker of Nextel, Bruno Lima. Okay.
NII.
NII. So
NII
this one
holdings.
Yes.
NII. This one really market you then.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yes.
But flipping the coin, a case that you really got a compounding, a big compounder of re-rating, and you got it really right.
Globant.
Globant
is a company that was born in Argentina and produces applications for consumer interfacing. So it basically does some consulting job to make, for instance, the application for Disney, the parks, where you see the lines and is made by them. No? Chase, the application that we use in the bank for that, is made by them. United Airlines, for instance, I think. So it's a technology company because it produces software in phones to help companies relate to their final consumer. It's not an ERP kind of thing, not back office, it's front office kind of thing. And people thought that it was not scalable because they needed interactions, like a consulting kind of thing. But their success and size made it actually a go-to. And most of their clients, if not all of them, most of them are U.S. companies, very high, very liquid, listed, like Chase, like J.P. Morgan is.
Interesting. So okay, let me start to address to the end of this chat.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, but for you, Carillo, to start warming up, the very last question of the show is what we call here in Portuguese is quadro de medalhas do clube, with which we can say the winners club. So for you to play with us and with everyone that sits there to get in the winners club, all you have to do is very simple task. And again, this is it's just a playing among everyone that joins us here. This is not investment advice. This is not investment recommendation, because we all do know and understand that a portfolio manager's job is to really set up a portfolio and you across the region and stuff.
Probably if it was
and all we ask here is just one stock in the Brazilian market for the next 3 months. That's it. that's the game. So start to think on your pick to join the winners club. One stock in Bovespa for the next 3 months. So starting to do some quick questions, quick though important questions. And the most important questions that I would like to hear from you just to join the season is who's gonna win the World Cup?
Brazil, of course.
No, really.
Of course.
No, you really believe it,
Mexico,
or you want to be like a really good visitor? Actually, fortunately, Mexico. It was supposed to be Mexico, right?
Remember that the World Cup started with most of the winners actually losing their first game.
Yes.
So if Mexico never wins, so it was probably a good candidate to win.
Yes.
No longer after today.
Mexico just got.
So Brazil.
Just got okay. So your pick is Brazil. You had a lot. You just share a lot of insights, a lot of some companies that you're looking closely, etc. But maybe this call of the World Cup is the one you'll be judged in the future. So Brazil, please get it right. And moving on, the following question will be yes. So we usually see portfolio managers sharing what books they are reading, what researchers they are reading, and here in the club we like to ask, what TV show are you following? What streaming shows you would like to share with the listeners here?
I think I like
Mexico has a lot of really good shows.
Yes, but they're more dramatic than
no, actually, I was referring to Chisperito and Chavo del
That's
Ocho.
a fantastic one.
And unfortunately, we are in the 51st episode. No one mentioned that yet.
That's a comedy. That's a very good one. Very healthy comedy, actually.
Yes,
not
very extremely popular here in Brazil, as you may know.
Yes.
But sorry to interrupt.
So I would recommend a couple, actually. The Dropout, which we talked about, which is Elizabeth Theranos, the Theranos story, Elizabeth Holmes story.
Yes,
and it's an unfortunate story because it was a successful woman that actually deception the world pretty much. And then the other fun stories are actually probably like We Crash, which is a story that everyone relates about WeWork and how it happened. And so those are the ones I would probably...
Actually, both you mentioned is becoming popular here in the club. Everyone is bringing this too. We Crash.
Top 3.
But probably. This Dropout too.
Dropout, I think it's
more recent. I don't know.
More recent, I think. I mean, people, here... the mentions, counting the mentions here, I think We Crash it's top 3.
The Battle for Uber is very good one too.
Battle for Uber.
The Battle for Uber.
Is that a title?
I think.
Which streaming?
It's that would be. I think that's in Amazon Prime.
Okay. Check
that
it out.
is the story of Uber, basically, from the beginning, the funding rounds, and how they fight with Lyft and all those things.
Good advice.
Here's my contribution to this part. I just watched it Wednesday by Netflix, Wednesday Addams. Guilty as charged, but it is good. It is good, but if you want to kill time, if you want to, just for your spare time to free up your mind, it's a good entertaining. Yeah, it's a good entertainment show. This is Wednesday by Netflix. And you, Bruno Lima?
Recently,
Yeah.
I was just talking about the Inside Man.
Inside Man.
It's a criminologist guy that murdered his wife, and then he Netflix, and then he starts helping, tough cases, wherever.
Is it good?
I mean, I like it. I like this kind of stuff.
Okay, so we reach the
Crash.
last question.
Okay.
Winners Club. This is the very first time that we are here in a conversation with a foreign PM, and make yourself the debut here. What will be your top pick? 3 months, one stock in the Bovespa to play this game here with us.
I'm going to lose because I'm not going to choose a commodities name.
Okay.
So I will go with WEG.
Nice.
Okay. What?
No, I mean a lot of PMs. They used to bring the WEG case here.
I mean, on the beginning of
but not for the Winners Club.
No, never. Actually, I think I mean
it's a marathon. Not
because it's a very
100
sprint
dash.
race here.
Yes.
But that's interesting.
Yes.
WEG. He's supposed to know. What is the ticker?
WEG3.
WEGE3.
Actually, it's been a ride. It's been a great ride this year, 2000.
It's been a ride for the last
10 years. Yeah. Amazing.
But it has to be for the next 3 months, so I can see you
sure.
on our top one in the Winners Cup. I wish you luck, and actually, thank you very much for making the time to give us this honor opportunity to have the first international investor, the first international portfolio manager, and a guy like you, 25 plus years in the J.P. Morgan and doing this asset administration, this portfolio managers for the emerging market, Latin American, to share your thoughts and your views here with all the club members. Luis Carillo, thank you very much for this opportunity, sir.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
Thanks,
Bruno Lima. It was an honor to speak English with you.
It's been an amazing pleasure to be with you guys.
A todos, muito obrigado por nos acompanharem até aqui. Nos vemos no próximo episódio. Um grande abraço.